Warning, heartbreak and payback ahead. It wasn't a lipstick stain on a collar or a suspicious late-night call that blew my 20-year marriage apart. It was a 17-year-old kid, my own son's best friend, shifting his feet nervously on the oil-stained floor of my garage. He couldn't look me in the eye when he said the words that turned my world to ash, "Mr. Henderson. I saw your wife with another man. They were kissing." My first instinct was to protect him, to protect my wife's honor. My second was a cold, coiling rage that promised to burn everything to the ground. I thought I knew the story, a midlife crisis, a moment of weakness, but what I uncovered next changed everything. The betrayal was deeper, the lies more intricate, and the revenge far sweeter than I could have ever imagined. You think you know the end? Think again. Before diving in, hit that subscribe button and give this a like. Let me know in the comments, have you ever faced a betrayal that shook you to your core? What's your revenge fantasy or your path to healing? Let's share our stories. Part 1, The Hum of a Perfect Life. Our life was a carefully curated masterpiece of suburban tranquility. I, Mark Henderson, was the 48-year-old architect of it all, quite literally. I designed the addition on our two-story colonial, the bluestone patio where we hosted summer barbecues, and the future my wife, Elena, and I had mapped out over 2 decades of shared dreams and Pinot Noir. From the outside, we were the gold standard in our quiet Connecticut enclave. I had a stable, if unexciting, job at a large firm, a compromise I'd made long ago, shelving my dream of a boutique agency for the security a family man craves. Elena, vibrant and beautiful at 46, had transitioned from a high-flying marketing career to a more fulfilling life as a semi-professional mom and proprietor of an online vintage decor shop. Our son, Leo, a 17-year-old with my eyes and his mother's sharp wit, was a good kid, navigating the final stretch of high school with his best friend, Kevin, perpetually in tow. The hum of our life was so consistent, so predictable, that I failed to notice when it started to change pitch. The signs were there, of course, but a man cocooned in the comfort of routine is a master of self-deception. It started with the gym. Elena, who had always preferred yoga and long walks, suddenly joined a high-end fitness club called Ascend. She spoke of HIIT classes and personal trainers with the fervor of a new convert. "You should come with me, Mark," she'd say, her cheeks flushed after a workout, a sheen of sweat on her brow that I hadn't seen in years. "Julian is amazing. He's completely transformed my outlook on fitness." Julian. The name was dropped with casual frequency. Julian's diet tips, Julian's thoughts on foam rolling, Julian's motivational platitudes. I pictured a muscle-bound 20-something and felt a pang of something I couldn't name, not quite jealousy, more like inadequacy. I was soft around the middle, my energy dedicated to client meetings and Leo's college application essays, not deadlifts. Then came the new clothes. Not just workout gear, but slinky dresses for girls' nights out that were becoming more frequent, cocktail-fueled affairs that left her coming home late, smelling of expensive perfume and whispering so as not to wake me. Her phone, once a communal device left on the kitchen counter, was now perpetually in her hand or face down beside her. She'd smile at a text, a private, self-satisfied little curve of her lips that wasn't meant for me. "Who was that?" I'd ask, trying to sound nonchalant. "Oh, just Maya from the gym," she'd reply, her fingers already typing a response. "She's hilarious." The strain wasn't a chasm yet, just a hairline fracture. We still performed the rituals of a happy marriage. We kissed goodbye in the morning. We asked about each other's day over dinner. We had sex, though it had begun to feel more like a maintenance task than an act of passion. During those moments, I'd sometimes feel a strange disconnect, as if she were performing a role, her mind a million miles away. I'd try to pull her closer, to find the woman I'd married in her distant eyes, but she would just smile softly and say she was tired. One Saturday afternoon, I was in the garage, trying to fix a wobbly leg on an antique chair Elena had bought for her shop. Leo and Kevin were out there with me, supposedly helping but mostly just talking about video games and shooting hoops with a rolled-up sock into a bucket. The smell of sawdust and old paint filled the air, a scent I'd always associated with home and fatherhood. "Hey, Dad," Leo said, "Kevin and I are gonna grab pizza. You want anything?" "No, I'm good. Don't be too late." Leo clapped Kevin on the back and they headed for the door. Kevin lingered for a second, He was a good kid, polite, a little awkward, and fiercely loyal to my son. He looked like he wanted to say something, but then just gave me a small, hesitant wave and followed Leo out. I dismissed it, teenage awkwardness. I went back to the chair, sanding the rough edges, completely oblivious to the fact that the foundations of my own life were about to splinter into 1,000 pieces. I was a man polishing furniture in a house that was already on fire. Part 2, The Whisper in the Garage. A week later, the whisper came. It was a Thursday evening, the sky outside a bruised purple. Alina was at her book club, an event that had, like her gym sessions, become sacrosanct. I was in the garage again, my sanctuary of solitude and tangible problems I could solve with my hands. I was organizing my tools, the metallic clink of wrenches a soothing rhythm in the quiet. Kevin appeared in the doorway that led to the kitchen. He was holding a glass of water, his knuckles white. Leah was upstairs, probably deep in some digital battlefield. "Hey, Kevin, what's up?" I said, not looking up from the pegboard. Hey, Mr. Henderson." His voice was thin, stretched. I turned. The kid looked awful. His face was pale, his eyes darting around the garage as if looking for an escape route. "Everything okay? You look like you've seen a ghost." He took a shaky breath. Can I talk to you for a second? It's important." My mind immediately went to Leo. Is Leo in some kind of trouble? No, it's not Leo. He's fine. He wouldn't meet my gaze, focusing instead on a patch of oil on the concrete floor. "It's God, this is gonna suck." I put down the socket wrench I was holding and gave him my full attention. A knot of dread began to tighten in my stomach. "Kevin, whatever it is, you can just say it." He finally looked at me, his young face a mask of misery and conflict. "Okay, so you know the town center by the fountain?" I nodded. "Yeah, I was there yesterday after school. I was waiting for my mom to pick me up, and I saw Mrs. Henderson." The knot in my stomach cinched tighter. "Okay, was she shopping for her store?" He shook his head, a tiny, almost imperceptible movement. He swallowed hard. "She wasn't alone, sir. She was with this guy. A really fit guy, black t-shirt, tattoos on his arm. Julian." The name screamed in my head, a silent, sickening siren. "They were at that little outdoor cafe," Kevin continued, his words coming out in a rushed, quiet torrent. "They were laughing. He was holding her hand across the table." I felt the blood drain from my face. My hands felt cold. I could hear the hum of the garage refrigerator, unnaturally loud in the sudden silence. "Maybe you were mistaken, Kevin. Maybe it was a friend." He finally looked me dead in the eye, his own welling with a pained empathy that was almost worse than the words themselves. "Mr. Henderson, I saw them. When they got up to leave, he leaned in and he kissed her. It wasn't like a friend. It was a real kiss." The world tilted on its axis. The tools on the wall seemed to blur. A 17-year-old boy had just handed me a lit stick of dynamite, and I was just standing there holding it, watching the fuse burn. Every late night, every private text, every distant smile suddenly snapped into a horrifyingly clear picture. My first coherent thought, bizarrely, was for him. This poor kid. What a terrible, awful burden to carry. "Kevin," I said, my voice a dry rasp, "thank you for telling me. That must have been incredibly difficult." He just nodded, looking relieved and terrified at the same time. "I need you to do me a favor," I continued, my mind starting to work through the fog of shock. "Don't say anything about this to anyone, especially not Leo. Do you understand?" "Yes, sir, of course. Go on inside." "Tell Leo I'll be in a minute." He practically fled. I stood there alone in the garage, the smell of oil and sawdust now feeling like a mockery of my domestic bliss. I leaned against my workbench, my legs suddenly weak. I didn't shout. I didn't punch the wall. I just stood there as a cold, methodical rage began to crystallize in my veins. The whisper in the garage had become a roar in my head, and it was telling me one thing: my life as I knew it was over. But a new one was about to begin. Part 3, The Museum of a Dead Marriage. The hours after Kevin's confession were a surreal blur. I walked through my own home like a ghost, an observer in a museum dedicated to a life that was no longer mine. Every object was an artifact of a lie. The framed photo on the mantelpiece, Alina and I in Tuscany, her head thrown back in laughter as I kissed her cheek, wasn't a memory, it was a forgery. The live, laugh, love sign she'd hung in the kitchen wasn't a cheerful mantra, it was a piece of bitter irony. When Alina came home around 10, she was glowing. She breezed in, smelling of wine and Chanel No. 5. Her face flushed with the kind of animated energy I hadn't seen directed at me in years. "Hey, honey," she chirped, dropping her keys into the ceramic bowl by the door. "Book club was great. Deborah is having such drama with her contractor, you wouldn't believe it." I was sitting in the darkened living room, a glass of bourbon sweating in my hand. I just looked at her. I studied the curve of her smile, the light in her eyes, and tried to see the woman who had, just yesterday, been kissing another man by a fountain. She was right there, but she was also a complete stranger. "You okay, Mark? You're quiet tonight." She came over and perched on the arm of my chair, draping an arm over my shoulder. Her touch felt electric, a jolt of revulsion and a phantom ache of longing all at once. I flinched just slightly, but she didn't seem to notice. "Just tired," I managed to say. "Long day. Well, come to bed soon." She leaned in and kissed my forehead. The scent of her perfume was suffocating. "I'm heading up." I listened to her footsteps on the stairs, the familiar creak of the seventh step, the click of our bedroom door. For 20 years, that sound had meant comfort, an end to the day. Tonight, it sounded like a cell door locking. I stayed downstairs for another hour, the bourbon doing nothing to dull the sharp edges of my thoughts. I cycled through the stages of grief at warp speed. Denial, Kevin's a kid, he must have been mistaken. Anger, how could she do this to me, to us? Bargaining, maybe I can fix this, maybe if I become the man she wants. And finally, a deep, soul-crushing depression. My mind replayed our last few years in excruciating detail. I saw myself working late to cover the mortgage on the house she wanted, coaching Leo's soccer team, because she said it was important for fathers to be involved, giving up my annual fishing trip with my buddies because she wanted to take a romantic trip to a spa that I hated. I had been the steady, reliable foundation, and she had built a life on top of me while dreaming of a different architect. Was it my fault? The question gnawed at me. Had I become boring, complacent? I thought of our love life. The flashbacks weren't erotic, they were forensic. I dissected every touch, every kiss, every shared intimacy, searching for the moment the sincerity died. Had she been thinking of him even then? The thought was a physical blow, winding me. I felt a surge of self-doubt so profound it almost brought me to my knees. I was a fool, a comfortable, predictable, loyal fool. I went upstairs. Alina was already in bed, feigning sleep. I could tell by the rigid set of her shoulders, the too-even rhythm of her breathing. She was avoiding a conversation she knew was coming, even if she didn't know why. I undressed in the dark and slid into my side of the bed. The space between us, usually just a few inches of cool cotton sheets, felt like a mile-wide canyon. I lay there, staring at the ceiling, my heart a cold, heavy stone in my chest. The rage had subsided for now, replaced by a chilling clarity. Understanding could come later. Forgiveness was off the table. First, I needed proof. I needed to see it with my own eyes. I needed to know the full scope of the lie before I set it on fire. Part 4, The Digital Ghost. The next morning, I was a different man. The heartbroken husband had been locked in the basement. In his place stood a cold, calculating investigator. I went through the motions of our morning routine with an Oscar-worthy performance of normalcy. I made coffee. I asked about her plans for the day. I kissed her goodbye, the brief press of my lips against hers feeling like a profane act. "I'm heading to the gym, then sourcing some stuff at the estate sales over in Westport," she said, pulling on a stylish jacket. "Sounds good. Have fun," I replied, my voice betraying nothing. The moment her car pulled out of the driveway, I went to work. Her laptop was on the kitchen island, open. It felt like a monumental violation, a crossing of a boundary we had always respected. But she had dynamited our boundaries, not me. My heart hammered against my ribs as I opened her browser. I felt like an intruder, sifting through the digital ghost of her secret life. Her emails were mostly spam and order confirmations for her shop, nothing. Her Facebook was a curated gallery of our perfect family. Again, nothing. Then I remembered our family phone plan. I was the account holder. With a few clicks on the provider's website, I was looking at a detailed log of every call and text. My hands were shaking. I scrolled down the list of recent texts. There were dozens to her friends, to Leo, to her sister. And then there was one number, repeated over and over at all hours of the day and night. Dozens, hundreds of texts over the last few months. I didn't recognize the number. I typed it into Google. The first result was a public Instagram profile. The profile picture was of a ridiculously handsome man in his early 30s, his muscles bulging from a tight black t-shirt, a sleeve of intricate tattoos covering one arm. The bio read Julian Croft, Ascend Fitness, head trainer and lifestyle coach. Your body is your temple, let's worship. I clicked through his photos. There were countless gym selfies, videos of him lifting inhuman amounts of weight, and motivational quotes laid over pictures of sunsets. And then I found it, a group photo from a fitness retreat a month ago. There in the back row, standing next to Julian, was Alina. She was beaming, her arm linked casually through his, her head tilted slightly toward his shoulder. She looked happier than I had seen her look in years. The visual proof was a gut punch. It was one thing to hear it from a teenager. It was another to see it in high-resolution color. This was real. This was Julian, but I needed more. Texts and a photo weren't enough. I needed to know the what and where. That night after she was asleep, I did something I never thought I would do. I took her phone from her nightstand. Her thumbprint was the key, and I knew she used her index finger as a backup. While she slept, I gently took her hand, my heart pounding with the fear of waking her, and pressed her index finger to the sensor. The phone unlocked. I opened her messages and found the thread with Julian's number. I started reading. The sheer volume was staggering. It started innocently enough, fitness tips, scheduling sessions. Then it evolved, flirtatious emojis, compliments. You looked amazing in class today. I couldn't stop thinking about our conversation. Then the emotional affair blossomed into a full-blown one. Plans were made, hotel rooms were mentioned, pet names were used. I can't wait to see you, Elle, counting down the minutes. They talked about me. Mark has no idea. He's so wrapped up in his work. He doesn't see me anymore, not the real me. Reading her words describing me as a clueless, passionless obstacle was like swallowing glass. She wasn't just cheating, she was rewriting our history, painting me as the villain to justify her actions. She had gaslit me not just to my face, but in her private messages, creating a narrative where her betrayal was my fault. He fed into it, positioning himself as her savior. You deserve to be happy, he wrote. You deserve passion. I scrolled to the most recent messages from that afternoon. Julian, can't stop thinking about yesterday. The fountain was a bit risky, but worth it. Alina, I know it was perfect. I feel so alive with you. Julian, when can I see you again? My place tomorrow, around noon. Alina, I'll be there. Mark thinks I'm going to a furniture auction. Tomorrow noon, his place. I carefully placed the phone back on her nightstand, my movements precise and silent. The hurt was still there, a raw, gaping wound, but now it was accompanied by something else, a cold, diamond-hard resolve. She had made her choice, she had written her narrative. Now I would write mine, and the final chapter was going to be an explosion. Part 5, The Architect of Ruin. The next morning, I woke up before dawn. The plan had formed in my mind as I'd lain awake all night, a meticulously designed blueprint for dismantling the life Alina had so carefully constructed. I was an architect, after all. I built things. Now I would apply those same skills to demolition. The first step was to establish my own alibi and create a witness. I called my younger sister, Chloe. She was a no-nonsense lawyer who had never been Alina's biggest fan, finding her a bit too concerned with appearances. Chloe, it's Mark, sorry to call so early. Mark, is everything okay? You sound weird. I need a favor, I said, my voice steady. A big one, and I need you to just trust me, no questions asked until later. I told her I needed her to call my office at exactly 12:15 p.m. and ask to speak with me, and to be very insistent. Then I told her I needed her to meet me for a late lunch at 2:00 p.m. She agreed, her voice laced with concern. Next, I went to our joint savings account online. Over the years, we had built a comfortable nest egg, money earmarked for renovations, vacations, and our eventual retirement. With a few clicks, I transferred exactly half of it into a new, separate account I had opened in my name only. It was a clean, surgical move, the first cut. I went to work and functioned on autopilot. I nodded in meetings, I reviewed blueprints, but my mind was elsewhere, counting down the minutes to noon. At 11:45 a.m., I told my boss I was feeling unwell and was going to take an early lunch. No one questioned it. I was Mark Henderson, the most reliable man in the office. Julian Croft lived in one of those new, soulless condo complexes on the outskirts of town, the kind with a generic name like The Reserve and a sterile, hotel-like lobby. I knew from Alina's texts which unit was his. I parked across the street, my heart a trip hammer in my chest. I felt a strange cocktail of nausea, rage, and a perverse sense of thrill. At 12:05 p.m., Alina's white SUV pulled into the visitor parking lot. She got out wearing a stylish trench coat and practically skipped to the front door, buzzing to be let in. She disappeared inside. I waited. The minutes stretched into an eternity. I pictured them together in his bed, and the images were a fresh hell. But I pushed the emotion down, converting it into fuel. This was not about pain anymore. This was about control. I had brought my professional-grade camera from my work bag, the one I used for architectural shoots. It had a powerful zoom lens. At 12:50, I got my shot. The blinds on one of his second-floor windows were partially open. I saw movement. And then there they were, Alina, her hair messy, wearing what was clearly his black t-shirt. He came up behind her, shirtless, his tattooed arms wrapping around her waist. He kissed her neck. She leaned back into him, a look of pure bliss on her face. Click, 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 I had it. High resolution, undeniable, soul-destroying proof. I drove to a nearby park and sat there, my hands trembling. The phone in my pocket buzzed. It was 2:00 p.m., Chloe. I met her at a quiet cafe. I slid my phone across the table and showed her the photos. Her face went from confusion to shock, then settled into a hard, furious mask. "That son of a bitch," she hissed, her lawyer mode activating. "Okay, Mark, here's what we're going to do." For the next hour we planned. Chloe was my general, mapping out the legal and logistical strategy. Freeze the joint credit cards. Document everything, line up the best divorce attorney in the state. She was magnificent, a whirlwind of protective fury. Her support was the first solid ground I had felt in days. As I drove home later, I felt hollowed out, but also strangely calm. The architect had his blueprints. The evidence was gathered. All that was left was to choose the time and place for the grand, explosive unveiling. And I knew exactly when it would be. Part 6, the dinner party. Alina had been planning this dinner party for weeks. It was for our 20th wedding anniversary. She had invited our closest friends, the couples we vacationed with, whose kids grew up with Leo. It was meant to be a celebration of our enduring love, a testament to our perfect life. It was, I decided, the perfect stage. The night of the party, our house was filled with the warm glow of fairy lights Alina had strung up in the backyard and the sound of soft jazz. People milled around the kitchen island, sipping expensive wine and laughing. Alina was the perfect hostess, flitting between guests, her smile dazzling, wearing a new dress that I now knew was bought to impress someone else. I played my part, the gracious host, the doting husband. I refilled glasses. I made small talk. I even toasted my beautiful wife, raising my glass to 20 years of partnership and adventure. She beamed at me, completely oblivious. The irony was so thick I could taste it. Leo and Kevin were there, helping to serve appetizers before they escaped to the basement. At one point, Kevin caught my eye from across the room. He gave me a look, a silent question. I gave him a subtle, almost imperceptible nod. "It's okay, it's handled." After dinner, as everyone was enjoying dessert on the patio, I tapped a spoon against my wine glass. "If I could have everyone's attention for a moment," I said, my voice calm and clear. A hush fell over the party. Alina looked at me, a loving, expectant smile on her face, probably thinking I was about to give another schmaltzy speech. "As you all know, tonight is our 20th anniversary," I began. "And I've been doing a lot of reflecting on what makes a marriage work: trust, honesty, sacrifice." I paused, letting the words hang in the air. "I always thought we had that." I saw Alina's smile falter, a flicker of confusion in her eyes. "For my anniversary gift to Alina," I continued, pulling a small remote from my pocket, "I wanted to give her something she's been wanting for a long time, a new passion. A new adventure." I aimed the remote at the large screen TV we had mounted on the wall inside, visible through the glass patio doors. I pressed a button. The first photo flashed onto the screen, 50 inches wide, in stunning clarity. It was the picture from Julian's Instagram of him and Alina at the fitness retreat, her arm linked through his. A few confused gasps rippled through our friends. "I believe many of you have heard about Julian," I said conversationally. "He's Alina's personal trainer, a real lifestyle coach." Then I clicked again. The next photo appeared. It was the one I had taken. Alina in Julian's apartment, wearing his t-shirt, him kissing her neck from behind. The silence was absolute, a deafening void filled only by the chirping of crickets. Every single person was frozen, their eyes locked on the screen. I turned to look at Alina. Her face was a canvas of horror. The color had drained away, leaving a sickly, waxy pallor. Her wine glass slipped from her fingers and shattered on the bluestone patio. "That was taken yesterday afternoon," I announced to the silent crowd. During the furniture auction, she told me she was attending. I let the image burn into their retinas for a few more seconds before clicking again, revealing a screenshot of their texts. "Mark has no idea. He's so wrapped up in his work." Alina finally found her voice, a choked, strangled whisper. "Mark, no." I looked directly at her, and for the first time in days I let her see the full, unvarnished depth of my pain and my rage. There was no more performance. "You wanted passion, Alina," I said, my voice dangerously soft. "You wanted to feel alive, you wanted to build something new. Well, congratulations, now you can, but you'll be starting from scratch." I turned to our stunned friends. "I apologize for ruining the party, but it seems the celebration was based on a lie. Please, feel free to see yourselves out." No one moved for a moment. Then slowly, in utter silence, people began to gather their things, avoiding eye contact with either me or the statuesque figure of my wife. They left in a funereal procession, murmuring quiet, awkward goodbyes. Soon, it was just us. Me and the woman I used to know, standing in the ruins of the life we had built, the evidence of her betrayal glowing on the screen behind her. The explosion was over. Now came the fallout. Part 7, the blueprint for a new life. The aftermath was as messy and brutal as I'd expected. Alina alternated between hysterical sobbing, furious accusations, and pathetic attempts at justification. "You don't understand," she'd scream. "I was so lonely you were never there. I was at work, Alina," I'd reply, my voice devoid of emotion. "I was at the job I kept to pay for this house, for your online shop, for our son's college fund. I was paying for the life you were so bored with." I had imagined feeling a sense of triumphant victory, a cathartic release, but mostly I just felt empty. Watching the woman I had loved for half my life completely unravel wasn't satisfying, it was just profoundly sad. The revenge had been a necessary cauterization of a wound, but the wound was still there. Leo was the hardest part. I sat him down the next day and told him everything calmly and factually. I didn't editorialize, I didn't try to poison him against his mother. The photos and texts were enough. He was quiet for a long time, his face pale. Then he just nodded and went to his room. For the next few weeks, he was a ghost in the house, caught in the crossfire of a war he didn't start. He was polite to both of us, but a wall had gone up. I knew it would take a long, long time to repair that damage, and the knowledge was a constant, dull ache in my chest. Chloe's lawyer was a shark. With the evidence I had, the divorce was swift and surgically precise. Alina's infidelity gave me significant leverage. I got the house I had designed and paid for. We sold it anyway. I couldn't stand to live in that museum of lies another day. We split the proceeds along with our other assets. She tried to fight for more, but the pictures were a powerful deterrent. Her affair, once a thrilling secret, was now a legal liability. Her social life evaporated. The friends who had witnessed her humiliation chose sides, and none of them chose hers. The suburban world she had prized so highly, with its emphasis on appearances and perfect families, had cast her out. I heard through the grapevine that Julian had dumped her shortly after the party, unwilling to be tied to such a messy public scandal. She had torched her entire life for a fantasy, and was left with nothing but the ashes. Did I feel good about that? Sometimes. In my darker moments, I'd admit to a grim sense of satisfaction, but mostly I focused on myself. I sold the big house in the suburbs and bought a smaller, modern townhouse closer to the city. I quit my stable job at the large firm, and with my half of the savings, I did what I should have done 20 years ago. I started my own small, boutique architectural firm, Henderson Design. The work was terrifying and exhilarating. I poured all the energy that I used to dedicate to my marriage into my projects. I designed spaces that were clean, honest, and full of light. My business grew. I was creating something new, something that was entirely mine. Leo went off to college. Our relationship was still strained, but we were talking. He'd call me to talk about his classes, and sometimes he'd even ask for my advice. We were slowly, carefully rebuilding. One evening, about a year after the dinner party, I was sitting on the balcony of my new townhouse, looking out at the city lights. My phone buzzed. It was a text from a number I didn't recognize. Mark, it's Alina. I know you probably don't want to hear from me. I just wanted to say I'm sorry for everything. You didn't deserve any of it. I looked at the message for a long time. I thought about the rage, the heartbreak, the cold satisfaction of my revenge. I thought about the life I had lost and the new one I was building. I realized with a sense of surprise that the anger was gone. It had burned itself out, leaving behind a scar, but not an open wound. Forgiveness was still a distant country I had no plans to visit, but the bitterness was no longer my co-pilot. I didn't reply. I simply deleted the message, took a sip of my bourbon, and looked back out at the skyline. The architect was finally designing a life for himself. And for the first time in a very long time, the blueprint was full of nothing but possibility. If this story hit home, if you've ever felt the sting of betrayal or the slow burn of reclaiming your life, hit that like button and subscribe for more tales of love, loss, and justice. Now I want to hear from you in the comments. Is it better to forgive and move on, or is revenge a dish best served cold? Tag a friend who would relate to this roller coaster. Check out my next video for another twisty saga. And if you have a favorite moment from this story, clip it and share it. Your story matters.